price tag. You magnificent, untouchable force of nature, welcome back. Or should I say, welcome to the moment they've been dreading since the day you stopped picking up the phone, stopped reading the messages, stopped giving them the one thing that kept their guilt manageable, your voice. Because your silence, oh, your silence has become the most expensive currency in their miserable little economy. And guess what? They're bankrupt. Completely, devastatingly, eternally bankrupt. And the beautiful, poetic, absolutely crushing part? They did this to themselves. Let's rewind for just a second so you can taste the full magnitude of what just happened here. For years, maybe months, maybe decades, they had access. Unlimited, unrestricted, take it for granted access to your energy, your forgiveness, your explanations, your second chances, your benefit of the doubt. They could betray you on a Tuesday, and by Friday you'd be answering their calls. They could disrespect you in public, and you'd still show up to their celebrations. They could wound you in ways that left scars on your soul, and you'd still leave the door cracked open just in case they wanted to come back and pretend to care. You were the bank that never closed, the account that never overdrew, the resource they mined without ever once considering that one day the well would run dry. But then something shifted, didn't it? Something inside you finally cracked, not in weakness, but in awakening. You didn't announce it. You didn't write a manifesto. You didn't post a cryptic quote or send a long, emotional text explaining your boundaries. No, you did something far more powerful, far more terrifying, far more permanent. You went silent. Not the silent treatment, not the petty cold shoulder, not the manipulative freeze-out. You went authentically, genuinely, irreversibly silent. You stopped performing. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending your worth to people who were committed to devaluing it. And that silence, that beautiful, deafening, suffocating silence became the bill they never saw coming. Now they're scrambling. Now they're panicking. Now they're sending the "Hey stranger" texts, the "I miss you" voice notes, the "We should catch up" emails that smell like desperation wrapped in nostalgia. They're checking your stories but not liking them. They're asking mutual friends about you. They're drafting apologies they'll never send because deep down they know that no apology in the human language is expensive enough to buy back what they lost. Your silence isn't a phase. It's not a mood. It's not a tactic. It's a price increase they can't afford. And watching them realize that, that's not revenge. That's just mathematics. Here's what they didn't understand when they had you. Your presence wasn't neutral. It wasn't just nice to have around. It was the entire infrastructure holding up their fragile sense of self. You were the one who listened when no one else would. You were the one who celebrated their wins when everyone else was busy. You were the mirror that reflected the version of themselves they wanted to believe in, the version that was good and worthy and capable of love. Every time they hurt you and you stayed, you were teaching them that consequences were optional, that accountability was negotiable, that respect was something they could defer payment on indefinitely. And you know what's wild? They didn't even know they were in debt. They thought your forgiveness was infinite. They thought your patience was a personality trait, not a gift. They thought your understanding was automatic, not a choice you were making every single day despite the evidence screaming at you to walk away. They spent your emotional currency like it was monopoly money, and the whole time, interest was compounding. The whole time, the balance was building. The whole time, you were keeping receipts even if you weren't actively reading them. And then one day, you closed the account. No warning, no grace period. Just straight to collections, except the only thing you were collecting was your peace. Now, they're experiencing withdrawal, and it looks like chaos. They're trying to replace you with people who can't fill the space you left, because the space you left isn't shaped like a person, it's shaped like a sanctuary. They're scrolling through old conversations looking for the moment it all went wrong, except there wasn't one moment. There were 1,000 moments. 1,000 small betrayals they thought you'd forget. 1,000 disrespects they assumed you'd absorb. 1,000 times they chose their comfort over your dignity. And you remembered every single one, not because you're petty, not because you're bitter, but because your body kept score even when your heart wanted to keep giving chances. The apologies they're drafting? Worthless. Not because apologies can't have value, but because these aren't apologies, they're negotiations. They're not sorry for what they did, they're sorry for what they lost. There's a difference, and you know it. A real apology comes with changed behavior, with accountability, with a genuine understanding of the harm caused. What they're offering is a coupon for a store that already burned down. They want the benefits of your presence without the cost of treating you like you matter. They want your light without respecting your boundaries. They want your energy without honoring your worth. And your silence is just you finally saying, "The price just went up, and you can't afford me anymore." You're not playing hard to get. You're not testing them. You're not waiting for the perfect apology that proves they've changed. You're simply living in a reality where they no longer have access. And that access was never their right. It was your generosity. Generosity they mistook for weakness. Generosity they exploited until it ran out. And now they're standing outside a door that doesn't open anymore, holding apologies that don't have enough zeros on them to even start the conversation. And that's not your problem. That's not your concern. That's not your responsibility to fix. That's just the market correcting itself. Let's talk about the story they told themselves while you were still available. They convinced themselves you were the lucky one, lucky to have them in your life, lucky to be included, lucky to receive whatever scraps of attention they decided to throw your way between their other priorities, other people, other plans. They built this entire mythology where they were the prize and you were the contestant, where they were doing you a favor by tolerating your existence. And you, beautiful fool that you were, you almost believed it, almost. But here's the thing about illusions. They only work when everyone agrees to keep their eyes closed. And the second you opened yours, the second you stopped participating in their fantasy, the whole thing collapsed. Suddenly they're looking around and realizing, wait, who's actually bringing value here? Who's actually showing up consistently? Who's actually capable of depth and loyalty and genuine connection? And the answer is you. It was always you. They were just too intoxicated by their own reflection to notice the empire you were building inside yourself while they were busy building sandcastles of ego. They thought your silence would last a week, maybe 2. They thought you'd come crawling back the moment you got lonely or nostalgic or scared of being alone. They thought your need for them was stronger than your need for self-respect. They bet on your loneliness. They bet on your fear. They bet on your history together being heavier than your future apart. And they lost. They lost the bet, they lost the game, they lost you, and most devastatingly, they lost the version of themselves that only existed in your eyes. Because you saw something in them they couldn't see in themselves. And now that mirror is gone. Now they're stuck with the unfiltered truth of who they are, without you there to make them feel bigger than their actions. The panic is setting in now, isn't it? You can feel it even from a distance. The way they're moving differently. The way they're suddenly interested in self-improvement. The way they're posting things clearly meant for you to see. The way they're orbiting your life from the edges, hoping for a crack in your resolve. But your resolve isn't cracking. It's crystallizing. Every day of silence makes you stronger. Every day of distance makes you clearer. Every day without their chaos makes you remember what peace tastes like. And once you remember that, there's no going back to poison. They built their entire sense of superiority on your willingness to stay small. They needed you beneath them to feel above anything. They needed you chasing to feel chosen. They needed you hurting to feel powerful. But the moment you stopped playing your assigned role in their narrative, the whole script fell apart. Now they're improvising, and it shows. Now they're desperate, and it reeks. Now they're realizing that the person they took for granted was the only person who actually saw them, and the person they thought was weak for staying was actually strong enough to leave. You want to know what your silence cost them? Let me paint the picture. It cost them sleep. It cost them the ability to enjoy their victories, because the person who used to celebrate with them is gone. It cost them their confidence because the person who used to believe in them stopped showing up. It cost them their peace because guilt is loud and your absence is louder. It cost them their future because everyone they try to replace you with is just a placeholder, a counterfeit, a reminder that they had the real thing and fumbled it. Every song reminds them of you. Every place you used to go together is haunted. Every inside joke is now an outside wound. Every mutual friend who asks about you is a reminder that they're the reason for the past tense. Every time they achieve something and reach for their phone to tell you, they remember they can't. Every time they're struggling and need someone who actually understands them, they remember they destroyed that bridge. Every time they see someone treating their person better than they treated you, they remember what they could have had if they weren't so committed to self-destruction. Your silence costs them their narrative. They can't paint you as crazy if you're not reacting. They can't paint you as bitter if you're not engaging. They can't paint you as obsessed if you've clearly moved on. They wanted you to explode so they could point at the explosion and say, "See, this is why it didn't work." But you didn't explode. You evaporated. You didn't give them a villain origin story, you gave them a ghost story. And now they're haunted by the person they could have been if they'd chosen differently. The cost keeps climbing because your value keeps revealing itself in retrospect. Every new person they meet who doesn't understand them the way you did, every new relationship that doesn't have the depth yours had, every new connection that feels surface level compared to what you built together, it all adds up. It all compounds. It all becomes evidence that they didn't just lose a person, they lost the person. The one who would have stayed through anything if they'd just been treated with basic human decency. The one who saw their potential and believed in it even when they didn't. The one who loved them not for who they pretended to be, but for who they actually were underneath all the performance. And here's the cruelest part, the part that will haunt them for years. Your silence costs them the chance to make it right. Because even if they change, even if they grow, even if they become the person you needed them to be, it's too late. That window closed, that door locked, that bridge burned. And no amount of apologies, no amount of growth, no amount of "I'm different now" will change the fact that when you needed them to be different, they chose to stay the same. When you needed them to fight for you, they chose to fight against you. When you needed them to see you, they chose to look away. Let's talk about what your silence bought you. Freedom, clarity, energy, time, peace, self-respect, boundaries, standards, the ability to sleep without anxiety, the ability to wake up without dread, the ability to move through your day without wondering if today's the day they'll hurt you again. Your silence wasn't a loss. It was an investment in yourself that's paying dividends every single day. You're not bitter, you're better. You're not angry, you're aware. You're not closed off, you're selective. You're not holding grudges, you're holding standards. And that terrifies them because it means you've leveled up into a version of yourself they can't access, can't manipulate, can't diminish. You've become expensive, and not in a materialistic way, in an energetic way. You cost peace now. You cost consistency. You cost emotional intelligence. You cost respect. You cost accountability. And they're still operating on the budget of bare minimum effort and maximum expectation. Your silence taught you something they'll never learn. That you don't need closure from people who never gave you honesty. You don't need apologies from people who aren't actually sorry. You don't need validation from people who invalidated you every chance they got. You don't need permission to move on from people who moved on from your well-being a long time ago. Your silence is your closure. Your peace is your apology. Your growth is your revenge. And watching you thrive in their absence is the bill they'll be paying for the rest of their lives. They scroll your life from burner accounts. They ask about you in conversations they pretend are casual. They watch your glow up from the shadows and tell themselves they're happy for you while dying inside, knowing they could have been part of it. They see you winning and want to take credit for motivating you, as if trauma is mentorship and abandonment is a favor. They see you healing and want to come back now that the work is done, as if they deserve to benefit from a transformation they tried to prevent. But you're not for sale anymore. You're not available for rent. You're not offering payment plans or second mortgages on your energy. You've learned the most expensive lesson life can teach, that some people will only appreciate your value after they've lost access to it. And you've decided that their regret is not your responsibility. Their nostalgia is not your problem. Their loneliness is not your emergency. Their apologies are not your concern, because you've moved into a tax bracket of self-worth they can't even comprehend, let alone afford. You know what really keeps them up at night? The possibility that you're not even thinking about them anymore. The possibility that your silence isn't strategy, it's just genuine disinterest. The possibility that you've healed so completely that they're not even a scar anymore, just a story you tell when someone asks why you have such strong boundaries now. They can handle anger. They can handle hurt. They can handle you screaming and crying and demanding answers. What they can't handle is your indifference. Indifference is the opposite of love, and your silence sounds a lot like indifference. It sounds like you've released them from the prison of your expectations. It sounds like you've stopped casting them in the movie of your life. It sounds like you've rewritten the script and they're not even an extra in the background anymore. They went from main character to deleted scene, and that's a fall their ego will never recover from. They're watching you build a life they're not invited to. They're watching you laugh with people they don't know. They're watching you thrive in spaces they'll never enter. They're watching you become the person you always had the potential to be, the person they kept small because your growth threatened their control. And every post, every smile, every sign of your peace is a reminder that they were the obstacle, not the support. They were the weight, not the wings. They were the storm, not the shelter. Your silence is doing what 1,000 arguments never could. It's forcing them to sit with themselves. It's forcing them to confront the gap between who they think they are and who their actions prove them to be. It's forcing them to realize that losing you wasn't about you leaving. It was about them creating an environment so toxic that leaving was the only form of self-love left available. Your silence is the mirror they can't avoid, the truth they can't deny, the consequence they can't escape. And the most beautiful part? You're not doing any of this to hurt them. You're doing it to save yourself. You're not silent to punish. You're silent to protect. You're not distant to make a point. You're distant to make progress. You're not cutting them off to be cruel. You're cutting them off because staying connected was killing you slowly, and you chose life. You chose yourself. You chose peace over history. You chose growth over comfort. You chose your future over their familiar dysfunction. Let's do some math. Every text you don't respond to is a boundary reinforced. Every call you don't answer is a standard maintained. Every apology you don't accept is self-respect compounded. Every day of silence is interest accruing on the debt they owe to your peace. They thought they could pay you back with words, but you've moved to a currency of action, and they're still writing checks their behavior can't cash. The equation is simple. Your worth plus their disrespect minus your tolerance equals your silence. And that silence is exponentially more powerful than anything you could say, because it says everything without giving them anything to argue with, anything to twist, anything to use against you later. Your silence is the period at the end of a sentence they wanted to keep as a comma. It's the closing argument they can't appeal. It's the final answer to a question they should have never made you ask. Am I worth basic respect? They're realizing now that you were never the problem. You were the solution they were too broken to recognize. You were the answer they were too proud to accept. You were the miracle they were too blind to see. And now they're stuck with the math problem of their own making. How do you replace irreplaceable? How do you substitute unconditional? How do you counterfeit authentic? The answer is you can't. You don't. You just live with the loss and pretend it doesn't eat you alive every single day. Your silence has revealed their emptiness. Without you there to fill the void, they're finally feeling it. The loneliness they inflicted on you is now their permanent address. The isolation they made you endure is now their reality. The pain they caused you is now their inheritance. And there's a poetry in that, isn't there? A justice that doesn't require your involvement. A karma that doesn't need your participation. A consequence that delivers itself. They thought they were powerful when they had you and treated you poorly. But real power is walking away from people who don't value you. Real power is choosing silence over circular arguments. Real power is letting your absence teach lessons your presence never could. Real power is knowing that revenge is letting them live with the choice they made and the person they lost. And you are powerful beyond measure because you did the hardest thing a human can do. You loved yourself more than you loved the potential of what they could have been. Fast forward 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, they're still going to remember you. They're still going to compare every person they meet to the standard you set. They're still going to tell the story of the one that got away without mentioning that you didn't get away, you were pushed away, and then you chose to stay away. They're going to romanticize what you had while conveniently forgetting how they destroyed it. They're going to credit you with teaching them lessons they refused to learn until it was too late. And where will you be? Living, thriving, loving people who know how to love you back, building relationships based on reciprocity, not rescue. Surrounded by people who add to your peace instead of subtracting from it. You'll think of them occasionally, the way you think of old scars that don't hurt anymore but remind you how strong you had to become. You'll remember the lessons without reliving the pain.